With the evolution of enduro riding comes the evolution of enduro bikes and components. Forks with 38mm stanchions are the new go-to for those who want a burly single crown fork, and RockShox currently offers 3 aftermarket options with thick 38mm stanchions. These are the RockShox Domain, the ZEB Select, and the ZEB Ultimate. Similar looks but different feels on the trail. In this video, we're going to compare these 3 forks and help figure out which is best for you. Before we get into things, I wanted to announce that we're doing a giveaway, and one lucky rider will win a RockShox Domain fork. So stay tuned until the end of this video where we'll share how you can enter for a chance to win a Domain or one of 2 other upgrade packs. In 2020, enduro-specific forks were being released left and right, and this included the RockShox ZEB. For years, the Lyric was the enduro choice in the RockShox fork lineup, but as riding kept getting more and more aggressive on single crown forks, riders demanded a bit more. The ZEB was designed from the ground up to outperform the Lyric in very aggressive enduro riding, and the primary focus was increasing stiffness where it counts. When the ZEB was released, it instantly became an insanely popular fork for riders with 160 to 180 millimeters of fork travel. If you want to learn more about the RockShox ZEB overall, check out this video by clicking up here. In the aftermarket, the ZEB is currently available in 2 different models. There's the ZEB Ultimate and the ZEB Select. The ZEB Ultimate is the top tier option aimed at the best performance possible, while the ZEB Select here is aimed at pretty excellent performance but with a slightly more affordable price. Then in 2021, that sweet trickle-down technology kicked in, and RockShox released a new version of their long-standing budget fork, the Domain. Now just like the ZEB here, the RockShox Domain has 38mm stanchions. However, the Domain's price is nearly 50% of the ZEB Ultimate, making it a truly awesome option for those looking for a stiff and burly fork without having to eat ramen for 7 months. If you've been looking at 38mm forks from RockShox, chances are you've been deciding between the Domain, ZEB Select, and ZEB Ultimate. Now don't worry, we're here to help by covering the differences in specs, and then performance, and then finally help figure out which is best for you and how you ride. Alright, first let's look at the available specs of each fork, including things like available travels, offset, dampers, weights, etc., to make sure that they'll actually fit your bike. All these forks have 38mm stanchions, all are air forks, so no coil options, all are only available in Boost 15x110 hub spacing, all come in 27.5 or 29-inch wheel sizes, all have sag gradients on the stanchions for easy setup, all are for a 200mm rotor mounted directly with no adapters, all have a clearance for a 2.8-inch tire, all are compatible with RockShox bolt-on fenders, all include a zip tie fender in the box, all are torque cap hub compatible, and all use maximum plush fluid for smooth operation. For offsets, both ZEBs are available in short 38mm or 44mm offset for 27.5-inch wheels, and only available in 44mm offset for 29-inch wheels, which is pretty standard these days. The Domain is only available in 44mm offset for both 27.5 or 29-inch wheel sizes, so no short offset option for 27.5-inch wheels. For travels, the ZEBs can be set to 150, 160, 170, 180, or 190mm of travel. The Domain does all of those besides 190, so if you need 190mm of travel, then you're just gonna rule out the Domain. But I don't know how many people need 190, so that shouldn't be a big deal. Now on to the fun part, dampers. The Domain is only available with the Motion Control RC, which is an emulsion or open cartridge damper where air and oil exist in the same space. The adjustments are low speed compression and low speed rebound. The ZEB Select uses the Charger RC, which is a closed cartridge damper with a piston to keep the air and oil separate. The ZEB Ultimate uses the Charger 2.1 RC2, which is a sealed cartridge damper with an expanding bladder. Now let's talk about cross-compatibility. Both the motion control damper in the Domain and the Charger RC in the ZEB Select can be completely removed to install the Charger 2.1 RC2 from the ZEB Ultimate. So this means that you can save a bit of cash up front by purchasing either the Domain or ZEB Select, but later upgrade to that top tier damper for better performance. This is great info if you bought a complete bike that came stock with the Domain or ZEB Select, as upgrading to that Charger 2.1 RC2 is an affordable, easy to install upgrade to instantly boost your fork's performance, which we'll talk about more in a second. That upgrade damper currently costs $337. Also, both the Domain and the ZEB platforms use the debonair air spring, which RockShox is known for. However, the design of the debonair air springs used in each is slightly different and not cross-compatible with the other platform, since the stanchions are actually different thicknesses. Also, more of that in a second. This means there is a separate debonair air spring for the Domain and ZEB platforms separately due to the different inner diameters of the stanchions. RockShox does claim that the difference are just in the sizing of the spring itself, and besides that, the engineering for sensitivity is designed to function the same. When looking at both air springs outside of the forks, it appears that this is totally true, as they look nearly identical, just with different outer diameters for each platform. Alright, now let's weigh these puppies. The Domain weighs in at 2,550 grams, the ZEB Select is 2,260 grams, and the ZEB Ultimate here is 2,300 grams. You'll notice the Domain weighs a bit more than both ZEBs, and that extra weight mainly comes from its stanchions and damper. The Domain stanchions use a more cost-effective yet heavier alloy than the fancier alloy on the ZEBs. The more affordable alloys are less stiff than the fancy stuff, so the Domain stanchions are physically thicker than the ZEBs to retain similar stiffness. The motion control damper also holds quite a bit more oil than the Charger-style dampers in the ZEBs, which also increases the weight. We asked RockShox if there was any difference in measured stiffness between the Domain and the ZEB platforms, but they confirmed that it was nearly identical and not even worth mentioning the difference. Last but not least, price. Right now, the Domain is $549, the ZEB Select is $815, and the ZEB Ultimate is $1,019. There's obviously a big difference in price between these forks, but let's talk about how they handle on the trail and see if there's also a big difference in performance. These forks are meant for enduro bikes and sustained, chunky, gnarly descents, and that's just what we threw at them. We've got tons of riding time on the ZEB Ultimate and a bit of time on the Domain as well. We have a bit more in-depth video on how the ZEB rides, which you can watch by clicking here. I'll start by saying that both the ZEB and Domain have an immediately noticeable increase in stiffness compared to their 35mm siblings in the RockShox fork lineup. The added support from these 38mm stanchions and beefier chassis design not only give you more confidence in the smash-through stuff department, but it also creates a more precise feeling when steering due to less chassis flex. So if you currently have a RockShox Yari or Lyric, but you're wanting a fork that's more stiff and confidence-inspiring on rough terrain, don't worry, as both the ZEB and the Domain will absolutely make a noticeable difference. Okay, so now let's do more of a direct comparison between these forks. First, let's talk setup and adjustability. The Domain here is extremely simple to set up with just low-speed compression up top and low-speed rebound on the bottom. To set up the Domain, I simply added air to the recommended amount on the fork's chart here on the lower leg, bounced around in the shop to match the fork's rebound settings to my shock's rebound as closely as possible, and hit the trails. After that initial setup, I didn't change anything besides adding compression to stiffen things up for the climb and then open it back up for the descent. This is easy as the compression adjuster is basically a lockout switch with just a few positions. Other than that, all I did was ride. The ZEB Ultimate, on the other hand, adds a high-speed compression adjustment with that Charger 2.1 RC2 damper, which took 2 or 3 rides to fully dial in. This damper is less of a simple lockout-style compression switch, meaning you don't just open and close it with an easy-to-remember preferred placement for climbing and descending. Instead, you're going to want to tune this damper to work as well as possible going up, down, and around the mountain, since you definitely don't want to be turning knobs and counting clicks in the middle of your ride. This means that setup is a little more critical since you don't just open and close the switch depending on which way you're facing on the mountain. So you'll want to be more diligent with initial setup of the low and high speed compression settings. I will say though that the change in feel with each click of low speed or high speed compression is easily noticeable, making setup pretty easy compared to other forks with similar adjustments. Now once you've got this all set up, there's really no reason to adjust anything any further unless you're going on a trip to an area with vastly different terrain than your home trails. Not mentioned was the ZEB Select here, which has the same damper adjustments as the Domain, so the setup procedure for both of those are the same. Alright, now let's talk about riding performance and how these things manage the bumps. The ZEB Ultimate is built for, well, ultimate performance, and that's just how it feels on the trail. It's buttery smooth, extremely accurate, extremely sensitive, supple, plush, and consistent. The Domain, however, is about half the price, so it obviously sucks. End of video, see you later. Wrong. I've ridden forks with the RockShox motion control damper in the past, which I thought felt a little chintzy, so I kind of went into testing the Domain with a bit of a preconceived notion on how it would feel. I was pleasantly surprised to find that it actually felt like really good. Upon dropping into the descent, the fork just felt pretty dang good overall. It was nice and smooth, handled chatter well, was very sensitive on small bumps, and I was definitely surprised at the initial performance. About 80% of my way down the trail, however, is where the motion control damper started to suffer just a little bit of performance fade. The fork's damping became just a little bit more harsh than it did at the top after about 1,200 feet of continuous descending. This is because the motion control damper has air mixed in with the oil, which becomes inconsistent with constant cycling. I gotta say though, I'm being nitpicky here. It's my job to ride bikes and think very critically about how things feel, and I honestly don't think a majority of riders would notice something like that. Also worth noting is the weight. The Domain does weigh 250 grams-ish more than the ZEB, and even though I didn't really notice it on the trail, I sure know that I wouldn't mind the lighter option. What I did notice was the difference of continuous bump handling when testing both forks back to back. Now onto the ZEB. Now I've got tons of time on the ZEB Ultimate, and I don't remember ever experiencing any bit of fade and damping performance due to that Charger 2.1 RC2's seal design with the expanding bladder. This damper's oil is bled free from air, meaning there's no air bubbles forming during constant cycling like the motion control, which equals better consistency on the trail. With the ZEB, you can expect the fork to perform just as amazing at the bottom of a 3,000 foot descent as it did at the top. Alright, besides consistency, this damper's high-end design has better overall oil flow, resulting in better sensitivity on small bumps as well, and has just a more composed feeling overall. Big bumps, little bumps, and everything in between are all soaked up nice and smooth by that ZEB Ultimate. It's hard to explain, but the Charger 2.1 RC2 and that ZEB Ultimate just feels more fluid throughout its entire stroke, whether you're just bouncing your fork in your garage or riding out on the trails. When riding at a low to medium speed, the Charger 2.1 RC2's increased sensitivity makes the fork feel like it absorbs every little tiny teeny bump. Then, when pointed downhill at a faster speed, the sensation feels just the same, which results in a crazy amount of traction as the front wheel really feels super planted between every tiny teeny bump. And when charging through a super rough stretch of trail with tons of repeated hits, the Charger 2.1 RC2 stands its ground, staying totally composed through the madness with no noticeable spikes in compression. The ZEB Ultimate recovers extremely well through repeated hits, which leads you to feeling very controlled the entire time. Now you may have noticed that I didn't bring up how the Domain handles teeny bumps and how composed it stays in repeated hits. Well, this is because you don't actually notice those little things until you actually ride the ZEB Ultimate. The increased amount of engineering and design that goes into that Charger 2.1 RC2 makes it a more precision-oriented damper, and it's riding a fork like this is when you start to actually learn about how that super high-end stuff acts on the trails. When switching from the ZEB Ultimate down to the Domain is when you notice that the Domain feels like it sort of skips over some small bumps here and there at higher speeds rather than absorbing them. And also you'll notice that the Domain is slightly less composed on repeated hits and feels slightly more skittish in the consistently rough sections. The recovery between repeated hits feels a little less controlled than the ZEB Ultimate, but still an impressively comfortable amount. I had more to say about the ZEB Ultimate because it's just more precise, while the Domain just works really good and gets the job done with less fine details about its riding characteristics. Trickle-down technology is starting to make an entirely new breed of entry-level suspension, like the Domain, and we're really excited how this Domain feels. With all of that said, if you've never ridden a ZEB Ultimate, then you're going to be extremely pleased with the Domain, since riding these forks back to back is what it takes to really tell the difference. The Domain does fork stuff really good, and it's an amazing option for its price. But the ZEB Ultimate spent more time with those big brain engineers and delivers a more precise experience on the trail. It's hard to actually pin the Domain and the ZEB Ultimate against each other, as they aren't really competitors with one another, but rather designed for different budgets and different goals. Alright, real quick, you might have noticed that I didn't really mention how the ZEB Select rides. Well, honestly, we haven't ridden one, but we have ridden many current model Lyrics with the Charger RC damper that comes in the ZEB Select, so we can at least guess pretty well on how it'll feel. We've never been mega impressed by the performance from the Charger RC in the past, and while it is an upgrade over the Motion Control RC, it's never been incredibly noticeable like the jump up to the Charger 2.1 RC2. The Charger RC will have a little more consistency due to its closed cartridge design, but from our experience, I wouldn't expect much more of a noticeable difference in sensitivity over the motion control. Also, the Charger RC lacks that independently adjustable high and low speed compression like the Charger 2.1 RC2 has, so you won't be able to fine-tune the fork as much. The ZEB Select does weigh a bit less than the Domain, which honestly is the main selling point there. If you want a burly fork with an easy setup process, don't mind a little extra weight, have a budget between $500 and $600, and want great performance, but you aren't necessarily chasing World Cup level performance, go with a Domain. But if you want a fork that's a little over half a pound lighter and don't mind spending about $250 more, hey, go with the ZEB Select. But if you want the best performance possible with the most sensitivity, the most traction, with the most composed feeling on brutally rough trails, and you've already balanced your checkbooks for about $1,000 leaving your account, then hey, the ZEB Ultimate is the fork for you. Also, this little devil here on my shoulder told me to mention that buying the Domain and upgrading to the Charger 2.1 RC2 damper would cost a total of $886, so just a little more than the ZEB Select at retail. Doing the same to the ZEB Select would cost $1,152, which is more than the ZEB Ultimate at $1,019 at retail. While the Domain is a little heavier, it's a great platform to learn and grow with for many riders out on the trails. Now, if you plan on upgrading to the Charger 2.1 RC2 down the road, the Domain may be a more cost-effective method of doing this if you don't mind the little extra weight. So there you have it. That's a lot of information on the RockShox Domain, ZEB Select, and ZEB Ultimate. Now, which of these forks would you ride? Do you think that you'd be able to tell the difference between the Domain and the ZEB Ultimate? Or would the Domain be good enough for you? Let us know in the comments below. We're really interested in hearing. All of these wonderful forks are available to purchase on our website, thelostco.com, with free shipping in the USA. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, and to see more in-depth mountain bike content like this, hit that subscribe button. Last but not least, as mentioned earlier, we're doing a giveaway. In just a few seconds, you can enter for a chance to win one of 3 upgrade packs. You could win a RockShox Domain fork, a new Renthal cockpit, or a hip pack fully loaded with trail essentials. To enter, simply click the link in this video's description, then just enter your phone number on our website page to sign up for our VIP SMS text list. Not only will you be entered to win the giveaway, but you'll also be the first to receive cool stuff like new product releases, product restocks, new videos, future giveaways, and other random fun and goofy mountain bike content. It's also a direct way for you to chat with us, as you can just text us a question right from your phone. Thank you so much for joining us. Good luck in that giveaway, and we'll see you next time. Peace.